All right, now we are live. Well, thanks so much, Ethan, for joining me today on Inner Journey, Do's and Don'ts of Dashboard Management.
I love it. Very excited for the conversation today. I love
So,
this.
I've been having this show for, I guess, 3, 4, maybe, actually 4 or 5 months now. And I always try to go into a little bit more detailed and practical tips and tricks from the guests that I bring onto the show. And I know you are one person that shares a lot of these on your LinkedIn. So I'm very excited to dive deeper into all the posts that you've been sharing, especially around BI and data analytics. So
Yeah.
just to start with this, I want to give us some intro to our audience for you. If you can share a little bit more about you, how you got into data, and what made you to decide to start Portable.
Totally. So my career, I guess most people in data start in random verticals doing random stuff. I actually started my career in real
You
estate
would say
investing.
most?
I would say most. I would say it depends on like my guess right now, people coming out of college, more of them have educations in terms of data. Whereas if you think about people that have been in the space for 5-10 years, they didn't get an education in data or database, data management, any of that type of stuff. And they started in something else. I would probably say upwards of 50% is my guess. What I'm curious to get your take. What do you think?
Yeah,
What do you
I
think?
would say you do find a more non-computer science slash engineering uh yeah grads that are in data, or when you look at people's background. But I think it's very much more for data analytics.
Than like data engineers and
That's
DBAs
right.
and things. I agree with that. I also think I think of computer science also as non-data in most respects, and then people becoming a data expert is
Sure,
to a
but
certain
that
point.
just
Yeah,
means, there's no such thing as a department of data in universities, which is
totally. Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
uh,
It's
so
so
that's
recent.
probably why. But
Yeah.
I guess I was just assuming that I guess more less technical or non-computer science grads being in data, which I'm totally with you on.
Totally. So yeah, I actually started my career in real estate investing. So I was buying and selling properties, investing in real estate private equity funds, and I found myself becoming the Excel spreadsheet person. So like on that team, I was the one that was going into our really complex models, looking at them, being like, "Hey, how do we streamline this? How do we improve it?" I found myself getting a lot more excited about that than I did around the actual properties. So I went to a 12-person data startup actually to do sales. But day one, the CEO was like, "Hey, do you actually know SQL? Can you build dashboards and can you implement our customers with shell script?" I was like, "No, but I'll figure it out." So that's how I got it. That was my first foray into like SQL, actually building dashboards, all of this. And it was very much, I think a lot of people, the way they think about data assets, whether it's reports, dashboards, automations, et cetera, comes from where they learned about this. For me, it was the CEO of our startup needed insights to run the business every day. And that was my job. It was not perfect data models. It was not perfect anything. It was, here's a read replica of our Postgres environment. Give us something we can use to run the business every day and see how we're trending, what's going wrong, what's going well, et cetera. So I was using Chartio, chart.io, and just building dashboards. And we had one that was called our daily dashboard. And that's where I spent most of my time. So did that for a little while, did product. We got acquired by LiveRamp. I did product there for a year. And then I looked around and was like, LiveRamp's 1,000-person company. Why don't we have a data team? Why is there no centralized data function at this company? So I wrote the job description, head of business intelligence, and became the head of BI at LiveRamp. So I was looking around, really doing two things. One was standing up our modern data stack, and the other was interviewing our execs to figure out, once we have this data stack, what are we actually going to focus on? And it's always some balance between the two of what's your data infrastructure and who are you working for and why. So spent a ton of time on that. Then I worked in corp dev and M&A and strategy trying to acquire data integration companies. So spent about a year taking my knowledge of the data world and looking at the data ecosystem through the lens of partnerships and M&A. And that's kind of what kicked off my excitement to start Portable about 4 years ago. Looked around at the market, was like, hey, there's a pretty big gap here. every other integration tool is focused on the same 100, 200 connectors. What if we were to build a ELT tool that's focused on everything else? We have at this point 1,300 integrations. A lot of them no one else in the market has. So that's kind of where we came from as Portable. It's a self-service ELT tool focused on the long tail as well as some of the bigger applications. But at Portable, I am also our data person. So at Arbor, I was building dashboards for our CEO.
Amazing.
At LiveRamp, I was standing up our data stack for our leadership team. And at Portable, I am the data person. I am the CEO. I'm also the marketing function. So it's like, I am also like right now, I think a lot about what dashboard should we use? What should we deprecate? What is too much? What is too little? So this is something that hasn't gone away since 2016 for me. I've spent the last 8 years in some capacity building and maintaining dashboards.
Amazing. Amazing to hear that you basically made your career, your ladder yourself to, well, started as a data person and then became a data team. And then now you're running a big data company. So that's pretty awesome. Yeah, because I always felt like I had a more, like a maybe more typical background, which is I came from computer science major. I got into statistical. My job back in 2007 when I was an intern at Sun Microsystems, I was hired as a statistical analyst, and I was building sales forecasting models based on their 10-year worth of sales and operations and inventory in R. And I was writing research papers on how to run Markov chain Monte Carlo models to make that more accurate. And it kind of like, so hence like a lot of people that I saw as kind of like more of a typical data scientist, I felt like we're coming from this background of running Jupyter Notebooks and R and that. Yeah. But then especially in the data analytics world, I do see a lot of people coming from healthcare background, project management, or real estate or finance. It's I think it is actually one of the components that makes data industry and data community in general richer and better. Because it's that understanding of the business side and the true domains of the business that makes the analysis of data more accurate and is more insightful. So it's great to see how you kind of came to like more deeper data the other way, whereas I came more from like very technical side. Anyway. So it's been really interesting to follow you on LinkedIn and seeing a lot of the different posts. So let's dive into it right away. One of the things that really caught my eyes was when you wrote this post about having 10 dashboards, that you don't think companies need more than 10 dashboards in the company. At SelectStar, we see a lot of companies with hundreds and thousands of dashboards, and it is one of the things that we help customers to reduce. But we don't necessarily say, oh, you need to have only 10. So I would love to have you unpack a little bit more, because I know that it's not just 10 and it beat all, but how you see that dashboard should be structured or created based on.
Totally. So there's a reason. So a lot of the headline of you should only have 10 dashboards is I do truly believe it. And then the second part of it is it's not necessarily about the dashboards that I'm talking about. It's about, as a team, there's two things that matter. One is how much value are you creating for the business? And the whole concept of 10 dashboards or some finite number of dashboards is 80% of the value is created by 20% of the dashboards or less, in my opinion. A lot of them are just trash. So if you delete all the ones that are trash, 80% is created by 20% of dashboards. So that's one, is like focus on the highest value stuff. If you can find the highest value stuff, you can create the most impact for your business.
So let's unpack this just a little bit. Yeah. When you say dashboard, you're talking about a page that has multiple charts inside. Is that right?
Yes, correct. Yep.
Okay. So it could have multiple reports or analysis baked in. Yep. So technically, even if I have 10 dashboards, if I look at each chart, I could have hundreds.
Yes, correct. Right? Yeah.
So how would you then manage each of the dashboard?
So inside of the dashboards?
Yes.
So
I'm going to only have 10, and what would that 10 be if do
yeah.
you have
So,
any thought on that?
so the way I actually think about this today, my best practice for this is I actually only have one dashboard at Portable, and it has 10 tabs. So the way I can view what's going on at my business is there's one place for us to all log into. So you don't have to deal with like the problem with having different unique data assets in different locations is where are they? Like, how do you know what's important at any given point in time? So the idea of having one entrance point into your data assets, the way I address that is one dashboard. So we have one dashboard. We call it our KPI dashboard at the company. On that dashboard, right now we have about 10 tabs. Each of those tabs is you can call it a dashboard, you can call it a subset of the single dashboard, but those are the things that I think you should limit inside of your company. You shouldn't have 1,000 tabs, because if you do,
Sure. It
you're never
doesn't.
going to you're never going to use most of them.
Yeah. So starting point, I agree, and I think this is why but I think most people treat it as a tool, right? I log into Looker and I see all these folders where I go into, and then in order, let's say folder called sales, I want to answer sales question, and there are other different segments of sales that are all dashboards, right? So I think for smaller environment, that makes sense if that is compacted in as one dashboard, and I have a tab called sales versus marketing, for example.
I think it depends on if you as a company make it clear this is where everyone starts their journey when they are looking for information. It could be inside of Looker, and then you click into one of four things. It could be in one single dashboard and you click into tabs. It could be in a third-party tool where you click in and you do. Most companies fail at systematically communicating that to every single stakeholder. And if you fail to systematically communicate that to every single stakeholder, whether it's a data person or a business analyst or a business stakeholder, now you've got a random person logging into Looker being like, I don't know where I am. I don't know where anything is. I don't know how to find my information. So I would say one of the most important parts, regardless of whether or not they are 10 unique dashboards or 10 tabs in a dashboard or 100 things in folders inside of other things, is a single strategy for how you organize things inside of your business and a rigorous way of communicating that to every single stakeholder inside of your business. If you fail to do that, no one's going to be able to find anything. And now your data team is not just tasked with building stuff that's high value and doing it in a cost-effective way, but also helping people find stuff, which is in itself a problem that comes when you have too much stuff for people to find. And when you don't think about it's like a marketing website. Most people have marketing websites that have 100 different tabs inside of them. I have not ever gone to a marketing website and been like, oh, I'm going to go click into tab number 76. It's always, what does it say on the homepage? I'm looking for their pricing. Who are their customers? Let me try this thing, or let me get in touch. And it's like understanding that user journey and that user workflow and making it very explicit, I think you can take learnings from that and apply them to data and think about, for the new business person that just joined your marketing department, when they show up in whatever tool you just invited them to, is it self-service? Like, is it actually something they can navigate on their own, or are they going to get really confused by the naming conventions and the folder structures to find what they actually have to do?
So let's, I guess, step back a little bit. I think what you're talking about is definitely an ideal place that everyone wants to get to. Having a one single, I don't want to call it source of truth because it's not like where the data is, but it is that single master dashboard that everyone can refer to and be on the same page on. So there are two parts on this. One is having all the metrics and dimensions that everyone is clear on and be aware of and can easily understand. And then the other part is actually like for those to actually answer all the questions that people may have. It is in a way kind of organization issues, right? Because on the business side, I think that the most essential part of those business metrics are all in like our financial reports. At the same time, for KPIs and North Star metrics for product or marketing, or operations, customer success, they may all be a little bit different. So having each department on the business side to define that is important. And in a way, I think that is that is why data teams exist. The without having a good understanding of data or being able to convert or like translate these business goals and the attributes underneath of what makes up of those business goals and metrics, defining that is not that easy for day-to-day, customer success, lead or like a sales leader. And I think this is where a lot of that data analyst work comes in, and then where a data team can really truly add value to the business. At the same time, I see the main challenge being, having a dashboard. And I think for you, when you started a dashboard, it started as an analyst at the real estate company, for you to be able to start creating that, it is a really great place. I'm curious how it has happened when you were at LiveRamp, because that's 1,000-person company. The business is already running, and I'm sure they have their own metrics that the business was referring to within their Excel spreadsheets. So when you're trying to bring that into the dashboard, what are the things that approaches that you took to make sure that people are not just keep referring to their own Excel dashboards or Excel sheets, but then actually using the data, and this data and metrics are things that actually make sense to the business?
So my take on this might be more controversial than my 10 dashboard take.
Okay.
Is I don't think it's the data team's job to bring all those metrics into one place. I think the data team's job is to go find the most impactful 2 to 3 things that they can focus on inside the business that no one else inside the business is able to accomplish.
Actually,
I see that. Yeah.
So I think that is a different part of it. One of the reasons why data teams exist in the company, or one of the reasons why data team is hired. And this actually is the part that also coincides with having 10 dashboards. Instead of building 10 dashboards, I could let the finance team run their own thing, or sales team to run their own reports. And for me to just go deep into the data and try to figure out what the insights are, right?
Are you saying as a data team, just act as a centralized platform team instead of as a solution provider in terms of actually generating the insights? You're just focused on curating and cleaning data?
No, that's more on the engineering IT side. What you're talking about is you want the data team to more focus on figuring out what is the next thing that we could do, because we are observing that users are using our product this way, or people convert better if they come through like this path, or we see a certain cohort of the users that has this characteristic that does better than the other, right? And I think those are certainly the main reasons why data science, data analytics teams are so big in so many companies. I feel like this is like kind of like almost like a separate concern from the dashboard side, because dashboards are mostly for operations and keeping track of what's going on. And then this side is more of an experimental and I don't want to call it more like an R&D, but more for focusing on understanding the behaviors of the users and customers. Do you agree?
The way I think about data, so like if you think about the last 5 years, we had a ton of data people and data teams that grew exponentially, spent a ton of money on tools, a ton of money on cloud compute, and built a ton of stuff. That's how you end up with 1,000 dashboards. And then in the last 2 years, rates went way up. Data teams got slashed because people were looking at them saying, why do you have 30 people on this data team? Does anyone understand how much that costs? Today, a lot of data teams are trying to figure out how do they justify why they exist. And if you can't directly point to the value you're creating, I think it's going to be really difficult to justify why you exist. So let's step back a little bit.
Yeah. 1,000 dashboards exist because data teams got all these requests from business teams, not necessarily wanting to know more about their user behaviors and customer behaviors. That's my opinion. 1,000 dashboards only happen because the data has been democratized, and the data team was enabled to be able to create as many analysis as possible for answering business questions. And usually these are not all dashboards, these are like reports, right?
Yeah, I think that is a massive failure in terms of the data team for two reasons. One, they weren't able to actually prioritize the things that are impactful and the things that aren't. By building 1,000 things, you never said no. If you like it, to me, data is very similar to product management, where your job is 99% saying no to stuff and 1% saying yes. And if you're unable to say no to low value stuff, your data team will get pulled apart. Your cloud bill will skyrocket because you said yes to a bunch of stuff that in the grand scheme of your company is not material to the business. That's like, yes, the business asked for it.
Yeah, I would say yes and no to that. I understand that, maybe many data teams might have said more yeses than nos, and that's how they ended up in these dashboards. But at the same time, each report was actually answering a question. That's why it was built, right? And there was a reason why that question was asked. It's because the business team did not know what is the true driver of in their departments, or things that they weren't able to see easily, because there was no existing dashboard that was answering their questions or their hypothesis. That's my belief. You know what I mean? There is a reason why things were created. Obviously, what is more important? Was this actually an important question or not? And that is something that not data team can answer themselves, because they don't always have that 100% view of the business.
I think the data team's job is to answer that question, is to find the 10 most or the 2 most important things for the business at any given point in time and spend all of their time on that. What a lot of data teams don't realize about 1,000 dashboards relative to 1,000 spreadsheets is 1,000 spreadsheets are free. When you have 2 production spreadsheets that you use for FP&A and budgeting that your team maintains, great. Your team's maintaining those. The other 998 Excel spreadsheets cost your company nothing because it's an Excel spreadsheet or a Google Sheet. Dashboards that are connected to a data warehouse, which run SQL queries, which pull data from ELT providers, every one of these keeps compounding expense for your company, where you can end up with a bunch of super low value tasks that end up costing your company millions of dollars in ongoing compute. And I think it's your job to turn those off. I think as a data team, your job is to say the ROI of these 700 is unbelievably negative. We never should have even entertained that. The ROI of these other ones, they should be done as ad hoc analysis in a spreadsheet. And these 10 are the most impactful things to our business. That's where we're going to spend our time. That's where we're going to empower people. That's where we're going to focus. So like, I think if you don't believe you own the P&L for your data team, those are the teams right now that are getting cut.
Sure. I guess I partially agree with you and partially disagree with you. I would say that it is true that the data or the report, you may end up with all these reports, but are they really millions of dollars of cost for customers to operate? Not really. I've seen customers deprecating more than 10,000 dashboards, and not dashboards, reports, but most of them were just not being used. And it's very clear that, they're not generating any queries, and they are just sitting there. So it's just the time to clean up those. And the only part that they weren't sure about is whether they should clean up or not. So because we do so much usage analysis of each assets, we were it was just the confidence that they needed. If those 10,000 dashboards were actually running as queries and generating compute, they would have already known that, is my guess.
So
Maybe
there's
not that many companies are in that position.
So the thing that becomes complicated there, though, is it's not just the dashboards. You have 1,000 dashboards. Sure, 900 of them no one logged into in the last 9 months, so no one is clicking run. It's not running a live query. That being said, someone on your team, depending on how you structured your team and how you got there, might be materializing a bunch of stuff through dbt, or through whatever transformation tool they have. So in addition to 1,000 dashboards, maybe you have 500 models. And those models could be running on a cadence because you thought you needed them to power these 1,000 dashboards.
Sure.
And in addition to that, you might be moving your entire Postgres database through an ELT tool into your data warehouse, and you're about to spend another $200,000 on that, and you can't point to how much of that data is absolutely necessary. So like the reason why I talk about a million, like I'm literally talking to a massive commerce company right now who called me being like, hey, we ended up with 1,000 dashboards. We're spending $1 million on software. Half of it's compute. The other half is a combination of visualization, ELT, and other stuff. And they can't point to why. Like they can't point to where is the $500,000 in compute coming from. And you could go find the queries and turn them off. My opinion is that's a waste of your time. First, start at the end and say, here are the 10 things that matter. Here are the 2 automation workflows that matter through reverse ETL or an iPaaS tool, and work backwards from that and turn everything else off. So like it's $1 million. That doesn't even include the headcount that's upwards of that. And
well, I'm happy to talk to that company because that's like really all we do, to let you know what's actually being utilized and not. And for the ones that are not utilized, if you can trace the upstream lineage to see whether this table actually or the pipeline should also be deprecated or not. But the part that I think I just saw this comment on LinkedIn says, from spreadsheet chaos to dashboard chaos. Like it's so true, right? But like, why dashboard chaos and not spreadsheet anymore? That's because if you're in a spreadsheet, you're looking at your local data that is stale, and you're gonna make wrong business decision, and that is a lot more costly for the company than having lots of dashboards that probably is a quote unquote right data, but then it's answering a wrong question. Like when you think about it in a more of like a high level perspective. I mean, this is why we have these tools, right? This gives us, like, all of us, abundance of being able to run analysis and answer many different questions. And you keep saying that you just need to find that most important questions to answer, and that's where you point to. My point of view is that, in a way, to find that most important questions, you may have to ask many different questions to get there.
I agree with that. And it's one of those things where I think as long as everyone's in service of finding the most, like, everyone, it's so interesting to hear the AI conversations right now around data, and everyone focused on how do we do more stuff? How do we streamline process? Whereas I think most data teams, as long as their North Star is what is the most impactful thing I can do for the business and how do I get there as quickly and cheaply as possible, things overall work correctly in terms of function. The only other part that it's like the spreadsheet chaos to dashboard chaos comment to me is so interesting, because the biggest asset of dashboards and automated pipelines is also its biggest liability. It's the idea that you can run something and it's not just a local version of a single point in time. It is a connection between a chart to a storage, to a compute, to a SQL query, to a data source, to a live application somewhere inside of your organization. That pipeline, that lineage of stuff that's going on comes with tech debt if you don't immediately delete the entire thing when you're done with it. And I think knowing when a spreadsheet is good enough, and knowing when an ad hoc report is good enough, and then knowing what needs to be productionized into something that can be accessed a second time or something that should be looked at every day, I think is one of the most important skills for a data team or a data team leader. It's not everything should be done in spreadsheets. I don't think that's correct. It's not everything should be a productionized report. I don't think that's It's like, you need to know when to, where and when to draw those lines. And I think
And
most data teams
this is why a lot of companies are looking into data governance, looking to set up more organized data, quote unquote, products, treating data functions to be more like product teams instead of an IT team. Instead of taking Jira tickets on requests, they will really try to understand what our product data projects should be and how they should be expressed to the end users.
And I just think, as someone who's done product multiple times before now at a startup, I think most data teams, the thing they're missing when they think about, oh, we need to act like a product team, is the first and foremost, most important job for any product person is to say no to 99% of stuff. So
Sure.
it's like, I do believe that if it's one of the top 2 things or 5 things for the company, it should go through data governance. It should go through CI/CD. It should go through all these different things that are absolutely mission critical to your business. If it's not, it should be an MVP, like just like product development. Ship the cheap MVP version if you know that's what you need, and then say no to the other 99% of stuff. I think that's the part that
Sure.
the data industry fails to
So I have
communicate to the data team.
thoughts on that. One is, so if I'm going to say no to director of sales asking me to, figure out this question, how would I know whether this is a high value stuff or low value stuff based on the question that they are asking me about?
Have them prioritize it and have the leadership team prioritize it. So when I was at LiveRamp, I was standing up the data stack, and I was interviewing every single exec, saying and people that worked for them in the marketing department, what are the most impactful questions we can answer with data? The CMO can prioritize their own stuff. In sales, the CRO, what are the most impactful things that matter? Oh, churn matters to us right now. That's the most impactful thing by far. Okay, you can locally prioritize, and then you get priorities for 10 execs. And now you go and you're like, I'm the data person. I'm not the CEO of this company. I don't have the right answer here. I have the CMO saying this is more impactful, and I have the CEO or the CRO saying this is more impactful. Get them in a room and have them pick an answer, and know that, like, the easiest way to say no to someone is to say there's something else that is more impactful than that. If you can't get yourself in the room with the most important people in the company, you're always going to work on low value stuff. So I think data teams get scared of saying no because they don't have anything better to spend their time on. And I would argue, spend all your time trying to get in the really important rooms so you can work on the highest value stuff, so that when you tell your CRO, hey, I can't work on that, they're like, oh, you're working on the metrics for our board. I get it. I understand why that's your priority as the head of data. Whereas,
for sure. I mean, I think a lot of this is making sure that within the data team and for that head of data to institute a process so that there is a priority assigned onto the requests that the team is getting. And for each of the team members in the data team has a good understanding of how that priority system should work. So that, but it almost like does become, in a way, like, when you centralize it so much, it does feel like becoming more like a service desk instead of working alongside with the business. I think it depends on the scale. In a way, we talk about scale of a data team. If I have 5 people versus 20 people data team, because for larger data teams, they usually have that augmented business focused analysts. So, it's 2 to 3 people that always work with the sales data and sales teams versus marketing teams that has more deeper understanding of the domain as a business and can also coincide with other smaller data teams if they need data from other aspects of the business.
And I do agree. Like in a very large company, where if you're at Google or if you're at Amazon or if you're at one of these big enterprises, you could have 10 dashboards for the director of marketing for North America, and each of those dashboards can be $1 billion decision. If your data team is managing $1 billion problems, there's a clear ROI there. Like you can justify having another human being locally optimizing insights. And then your head of data's job is globally optimize where those resources are allocated. Your job as if you're managing a 20-person data team, it's find the most important stakeholders and make sure resources are aligned to them, as long as every single one of your resources is generating a massively positive ROI. I think a lot of data teams get caught in the trap of saying no to stuff because they want to work on technology. And that's not an okay answer, in my opinion.
That's something completely different. I'm here. Like my assumption is that the data team is trying to build and help the business side rather than building technology. So we can maybe talk about that as a separate topic. But also going back to what you were saying about why don't you ask the business to prioritize what's so important versus not? And I think that is coming from a position of not necessarily always having the most understanding of the business. Whereas I think data teams should more, because they get to be able to see like, how the business actually looks like, or how the user flow actually looks like. So they should have more insights and aspect of to say, hey, I understand that you like, I think one is, what's the business question you're trying to answer? And the metrics that you're asking us to pull in, like, can give you more of what has happened. But if you want to answer what is the leading indicator and the drivers to answer that questions, you should look at this dashboard or these types of metrics. What do you think? So I think that like a back and forth of solutioning or coming up with the right product is actually a really big part of the data analytics team that does not necessarily happen all the time.
Oh, I think it's the exception instead of the rule. Like, yes, it should. I think it's the most. Yeah, I think the exception. I am amazed when I find data people that are in the room with someone being like, "What is the business problem we're trying to solve? Let me understand that." And then they keep asking more and more questions about the problem, not saying, "Oh, I have this SQL query. I can go." Like they don't care about how they're going to solve the problem. They spend all of their time trying to understand the problem. It's like, it does have analogies to product. Like, the goal of a product team is not to go say, "Oh, I have this feature thing that I can give you." The goal is to sit down with a customer and say, explain your pain to me. Explain to me the things that you're trying to optimize for, the things you're trying to focus on, the journey you're going through, and what you're looking for. It's not to then come back and be like, "Oh, I have this feature for you." That's like, to a certain extent, what a salesperson's supposed to do. As a product person, it's really understand and put yourself in their shoes. And I think data teams, it's really interesting to hear data teams when they think about something like marketing, where it's rare to see a data person do a deep dive into not marketing data, but into what is your marketing team trying to do? Your marketing team is trying to either create brand awareness or direct response actions from prospects, and putting yourself in the shoes of, okay, what are we trying to optimize for? Oh, we want more people to sign up for our product. Now, as a data person, you don't have to just look at a metric. You're trying to help collaborate with your marketing team on how do we get more signups.
Yeah, and I think that is the right way to go. And it's not just keep digging into the problem of, oh, like, how does the sign up happen and where did the sign up come from? It's for now the data team to suggest, okay, for signups, this is all the attribution we can see of how customers that come to our site. And, given these cohorts, here are some other attributes that we could look into to see if that really matters to the sign up number. Like things like that. I think that type of kind of trying to come up with that MVP solution.
Yep.
I think it is the important step to take.
Yeah. There's a concept that you're probably super familiar with. A lot of data people probably aren't, is like, in product management, you either try and understand the user story, like what is the thing that the customer is trying to do, or an implementation detail. A customer might come to you and say, "Hey, I want to be able to," like in Portable, we get this all the time. It's like, "I want to be able to run this on a cadence. I want my data flow to run at a specific time in the morning every single day." And that is an implementation detail. That is not their goal. So as a product person or as a data team, your goal is not say, "Oh, what is the best way to run this thing on a cadence?" Your goal is, why do they care? What is the customer trying to do when they run it on a cadence? And if you can figure out why they care, that might not be the best solution to that problem. It might be the fastest way to get them off your back. But if you can actually solve their problem, which is, oh, they want to kick off the next step in their data pipeline, it's like, okay, it doesn't matter when it runs, as long as we can kick off a webhook that kicks off your transformation job, it accomplishes the problem more foundationally. I think a lot of data teams need to get comfortable asking not like taking the implementation requests and then saying, I get it, that's the task you want me to do, but tell me more about the problem, because there might be a better solution given your expertise as a data team and the data you have accessible to you.
Yeah, in a way, I think this is something that you would say is that you have a good product manager like sense, or if you don't, if they, for bad product managers, they'll just take that feature and say, oh, well, the user has asked for it, or this big customer has asked for it. But my follow-up question is like, why is that so important to them? Like, does it like make their top line revenue higher, or do they like what's that business driver that made them ask for that feature? And I think data team needs to do the same to truly understand why that's so important to the business, why that metric or dimension and the question that they're trying to answer is so important. So awesome. So I want to switch the topic a little bit, because we talked a lot about the data teams and also just building analysis. So far, our main assumption here is having the analytics team. But at the same time, for our internal stakeholders and users to ask the right questions and provide better context to the data teams, it is important for the business stakeholders to be also aware of some type of data model, how the business processes translate into like what type of numbers, metric dimensions, and maybe even like a tables, because they are familiar with spreadsheets anyway. You have mentioned that you do not believe in self-service analytics. Can you elaborate a little bit more on that? Because you mentioned that you would rather have a shadow data team. So like what do you mean by that? How would it work? Does it mean that no businesses can run SQL queries and they only have to consume what the data team provides? Or can there be what would be the right, more of an ideal picture like of how much it should and can business teams be able to do their own analysis and come up with solutions?
Yeah. So I think it depends on. So if you think about business units inside of a company, you've got your marketing team, you have your product team, you have your engineering team, you have your customer success team. A lot of data teams look around and they're like, what are all the problems I can solve? And, customer success wants insight into churn, or the e-com team wants insight into who's ordered what. And the data team looks at it and it's like, oh, no one has solved that problem. No one knows who's ordered what. I'm going to build a dashboard on top of the Shopify data and give it to that person, and they're going to use it. That person could have just logged into Shopify and gotten that answer themselves. Or the customer success team could have just logged into their churn tool or their CRM system and got the answer themselves. It is the right tool for the job to extract the data, put it in a warehouse, run compute, build a dashboard, maintain the dashboard, or is the right tool operational analytics directly in a tool? I would argue that most business units are dealing with, most individual contributors inside of business units stay very locally focused on operational data for their business unit. A customer success person, they might need some product data. So don't get me wrong, there is some world in which some information is useful to them. It's very possible they can get that out of a tool. So I would say as a data team, you have to be able to acknowledge not just, can I solve this problem, but how difficult is it for someone to get this data anyway? Like finance, like another thing that I think is a huge waste of time for a lot of data teams is trying to rebuild financial reporting with SQL. If your finance team is very good at using spreadsheets to build your P&L on top of QuickBooks or on top of NetSuite, and all the metrics are already there, so your leadership team, your board, your CFO, your CEO can see what's going on inside of the business, you rebuilding all of that on top of a data warehouse, incrementally, it's the same data. It's the same thing. So is there really additional value being, like, materially large amounts of value being created there? No. So like, yeah.
My question is that when I said self-service analytics, I'm talking about the data literacy training and access to the tool as an effort that organizations take in order to enable marketing ops, sales ops, customer success people to be able to pull data and see or build reports on their own. Because if I'm going to meet my customer tomorrow, I want to prepare for that meeting. I want to see all their journey and things that they've done in different parts of the platform, and I want to see, maybe compare that with how similar other customer industries have been done within our platform and give them some suggestions, right? So that is like a more personalized, I guess, could be done as a like a dashboard that the data team creates, but not everyone may have that. Or the customer success person may have a question about, oh, like they are on this plan. How do other customers in this plan with a similar characteristic also behave? Like, so this is a question usually to the data team. But with self-service analytics, the goal is for a lot of these small different questions and tweaks to be answered by the customer success rep on their own, right? So like that self-service analytics, is that something that you believe is just not possible, or you just don't believe that is a good case to do? Or
Yeah, I would argue that the customer success rep can get 90% of that data directly out of their CRM system. If not, pick a different CRM system and use different operational tooling. Train your teams on the local tools they need. And if there's something really big where it's, hey, we think there's a massive way to reduce churn by syncing these two things and understanding these two more things about our customers in a way that's useful, the chief customer officer needs to explain why that is a higher priority than allocating marketing spend. And if it is a higher priority, then it should be something that the data team thinks about. It's not a we should allow every business person to answer every question out of centralized data infrastructure. I think the default answer should be let them use their operational tooling, pick the right tools for the right job, let them use spreadsheets to fill in the gaps. And if it's a really, really big problem and a really, really big opportunity where a data team can scalpel out like the specific thing that will create 20% reduction in churn, that is a phenomenal use of centralized data resources. The idea of creating all of the infrastructure with all of the edges, with all of the support for anyone to do whatever they want with your data, and then having to pay all the license fees for all these people to access it, and then have to deal with all the questions they have because they don't know how to use this data, I think is a
yeah, I mean, it is an investment that companies make, and that's mainly because the goal and the vision of having everybody being enabled to be able to answer questions with data is actually like really attractive. It really does make companies and everyone in the company to be able to move faster and more effective. Instead of having to wait for somebody else to give them the data that they don't have access to, but could be really relevant to the analysis that they're doing. But I totally also understand that on the other hand, you don't want this to go out of control, and you don't want this to be just sprawling everything that is not even true or is correct because it wasn't governed well. And I think that's where the data governance comes from.
If you think fast forward 5 years, if you take my approach and you take your approach, or not your approach, if you take the two approaches, one of them is build infrastructure, self-serve everything, give everyone access to it, etc. And then you go fast 5 years in the future, it'll be great. People will have all this additional value. But as a data team, you won't be able to justify, did it work? What were the decisions we made along the way? It was just very, very large waterfall investment into infrastructure, then into transformation, then into data modeling, then into cataloging, then into letting people do stuff with very little insight into what's going along the way. Whereas my approach, if you can, like at some point, someone will say, hey, if we get this metric in front of every one of our customer success reps, it can increase our revenue. It can reduce our churn by 20%. That's going to have a $2 million a year benefit for our business. That's why we're going to do it as a centralized data team. You now have a log, a historical log of here are the decisions we made and how much they cost us and how much revenue impact they had on our business. Where as a data team at any given point in time, if rates go up again and someone looks at your team and they says, why are you spending $2 million on centralized infrastructure? And why do you have a 20-person team? You should be able to say, here's all the places where we've created all this value and why. The CRO said this was super impactful. The CMO said this was going to save them $2 million a year. The CEO said this was the most important thing for the board. Even if you get to the same spot at the end, I would rather be the data team that can point and say, I'm spending 3 full-time equivalent headcount on my team and $200,000 on infrastructure. And I have 4 execs that will pay those bills for me because they know I'm impacting their business in a material way. I would rather be that data team than the one over there saying, I believe this is good. I believe people are answering high value questions, but they can't point to the buy-in to back it up. Because in a scenario where people are being cut or in a scenario where you're asking for more resources, data matters. And I think the way in which you do it does matter in terms of how much resourcing you can get and how solid of a team you've built in terms of.
So your position is that the data team needs to be centralized in order for the data team to keep track of how and why they bought or used this infrastructure and built this data model, and keep track of what the ROI of the business that they drove.
So centralized is an interesting question. Some companies should not have a centralized data team. They should just have a data team inside their marketing function. A lot of companies where they're super focused on marketing, it shouldn't be centralized. It should be a marketing-owned data team because that's how the business works. Other teams should have 2 different data teams because they have 2 very powerful businesses where it's impactful. Whatever it is, you need to be able to justify, here's what we're spending and here's the impact we're creating, and here are the execs that will back up the fact that I've created that value for them. If you can't do that and your answer to why your data team exists is to democratize data, it's a very, very bad spot to be if your company is ever not in hyper growth mode, because you have to back it all up. You have to be the one to say, here's why I have 5 people on my team. And
sure, and I think one of the things that I think Sebastian also added another comment here, that a lot of SaaS products do not necessarily have all the basic reporting and analytics, and that's why you need to build these reports yourself. Like even if I'm in marketing, and I'm looking at my HubSpot, HubSpot has a lot of reporting, but like if I'm looking at a new HubSpot competitor and I want to understand how to drill into this data, that SaaS product probably won't give you that. And here's like an example: consolidating all these ERP operational customer tools and that billing that part and making sure that you are joining on the right dimensions so that it actually looks like one consolidated view of the department is actually a part of data team's role and data engineering role today, I would say.
So this question to me, if the idea was as a data team, I'm going to consolidate all the ERP system and then self-serve reporting, that's one thing. In this case, what I would effectively say is you have 7 different ERPs with mission critical data that is the only way to rebuild your P&L. Like otherwise you cannot, if you're a publicly traded company, you can't report to the street. If you're private equity owned, you can't actually understand how your investment's doing. In that case, what is the other option? If you already have a finance team that is doing this manually, and it only takes a third of a full-time person's job to do this, are you really going to save them money by trying to centralize that in a data warehouse? If your finance team can't do this and it's impossible, well, now it should be one of your company's highest priorities globally because you have to be able to do your financial reporting. If your finance team has 3 full-time equivalent doing this manually today, and you can do it with a half a data engineer and some data tech for $200,000, it might be cheaper to spend the $200,000 than it is to have the 3 finance people. But you can then say,
I actually like that angle of instead of data team having to pull all the data from hundreds of different systems to just create that one consolidated metric or tool, why don't you guys just upgrade your ERP and just use a new tool?
It's like I think it's very easy to look at the problem and say data can solve this. Data can solve most problems. The question is, what is the other option? If the other option is we already have an answer to this and the finance team's using spreadsheets and we don't like spreadsheets, it's how expensive is that problem though? Like, and how much more value are you going to get out of your data team doing this? Because if it's negligible, don't do it. If it is the most impactful thing to your business and your CFO is about to hire 5 people, as a data person, you should raise your hand and say, I can do that with 1. But CFO, I need you to mark down that I just saved you 5 full-time equivalent by hiring this 1 person. And if you ever come to me and ask me why I have this resource, it's because I saved you 5 people. And get that, like, so it's like by getting things like that as a data team, you can make it very clear that the things you're working on are extremely impactful to the business, and you can justify why your headcount exists, why you're investing in this technology, why maybe when you ask for a second engineer, a second data person, you don't have to go justify the next project. You can be like, hey, I saved you 5 finance people. I believe I can now help our CMO with this problem. I don't know for sure, but I already saved you 5 people. If you give me 1 more full-time equivalent, let me go make this bet. If I can't help the CMO, I'll help the CRO. But you have the data to back up why you have these people and why you have these tools. Whereas self-service doesn't give you the same information. It doesn't give you the same level of buy-in from business stakeholders. They go try and solve problems on their own, and they're never going to come back and be like, hey, I built this thing because of your self-service analytics, and as a result, it's so great, I think you should hire another data person. It rarely works that way. So even though you can get to the same spot doing both, I think as a data team, having the information from stakeholders around how much impact did you actually create for them and how relative to their other option is super, super important to justify growth or investment.
Yeah, I mean, this is like, there's no right or wrong answer. I would say, like, this is why most of the recommendation when we talk to data teams and data leaders around structuring their teams, it's actually more around this like hybrid model. Have an embedded data analytics teams within these businesses, but it's actually reporting to the centralized data team that drives center of excellence and all the infrastructure and everything else, because both sides are really important, enabling the business to make decisions faster, but then also making sure they're answering the right questions from the beginning, and that should really come from the data team. But I really like this idea of kind of asking the question back. Do you really want to pull all that data that's going to take like this long of a time and this much of effort? Or have you thought about maybe, updating your tools or having your, your analyst to do this in Excel? Like, how long does it actually take every week for that Excel spreadsheets to come through? I understand that it can be a very painful manual exercise and can be error prone, but it is definitely worth discussing.
The other thing about the finance use case is so interesting to me, because it's like, in addition to that, it's like, yes, spreadsheets are error prone. SQL queries can be a black box. So like, as a finance team, would you rather have a error prone spreadsheet that you can add checks to and tests for, and anyone on your finance team can go and see exactly what happened? Or would you rather have a number that looks off and the only person that can answer it is a data analyst or a data engineer who wrote Python plus SQL plus what, like, string replacement stuff to get you, like, which one of those puts the CFO in a better spot to answer questions quickly and move the business forward? It depends on the company. If you have a 30-person data team and you have people that can get back to the CFO really fast on that type of stuff, the data team might be the answer. But there's also downsides of not doing it in a spreadsheet.
Right. And I think that's also a great point, to give them have them to understand the trade-off of having all of this to be more quote unquote automated. I think is definitely a good point. Awesome. We used up all of our time. I still had a few more questions to go through. So hopefully I can have you at the show again. If you guys enjoyed our conversation, please leave a comment to bring back Ethan for later.
Really,
Not part
really
of
enjoyed the
the
conversation.
episode.
This was I really enjoyed it.
But thank you so much for being here. Have a great weekend. And I will see you probably in June for Snowflake Summit.
Yes, definitely.
Thank you, Ethan.
I will see you there. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.